Hello and welcome to the Game Dev London podcast, a community of amazing people who love talking about and sharing their love of the details behind making games, whether or not they're actually based in London. I'm your host, Oscar Clark, he, him pronouns, and I am on a quest to understand everything you want to know about game dev, but never dared to ask. And today I am delighted to be joined by Michael from Rizing Games. Michael, tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Well, thank you so much for letting me be here. As Oscar just pointed out, my name is Michael, and I'm the head of Rizing Games UK, based at Cambridge Regional College. And I've been involved in games design, I think, just short of 10. Yeah, it's coming up to about 10 years now. It's been quite a journey, shall we say, to kind of see it from the other side of the fence.
So, as someone who grew up in that region, I grew up in a lovely place called March. It's a small town, and the only good thing about a small town is you hate it and you know you have to leave. But I do have very fond memories of Cambridge, in particular, and Peterborough, I must say. Which part of where is that? Where is the college based?
The college is based. Try to get the bearings now. It's just North Cambridge, I think, within King's Hedges. Well, I'm from Ely at the moment, so I'm
Ely.
Just on the way from you. Yeah.
So yes, very fond memories of Ely. I've actually got a lot of friends who still live in Ely and Little Port. Anyway, enough nostalgia over my childhood. In fact, I had this weekend. I was last weekend. Sorry, I was in Norwich. For the Nordev conference, and lots of amazing game developers there. And I walked past a cafe where my 8th birthday party, at least I think it was my 8th birthday party, was in. That's still there. It's still there, even after the pandemic. Anyway, yes, we do ramble. I do tend to ramble a bit on these things. We are here for a purpose, however. We're going to bring us back. So talking about youth, talking about exploration, how we got interested in games. Let's talk about that, because we're talking about education. We're talking about games education, and you've got a particular interest in that, obviously. So when I was the age I was having my 8th birthday party in Norwich, or when I was living in March, game development as a career was not a thing. I say that.
Yeah.
Apparently, the year I left, I think it was the year I left, Sensible Soccer decided to set up in March, and John Hare, who's now a friend of mine, told me this, and I was like, "How? What were you doing in that town?" Because it was horrible. Anyway, the point being, though, is we're in a different world than back in my grey-haired youth, where actually there is a recognition of games as a career. There is a recognition of games as a discipline. What does that look like right now? What does games as a discipline look like?
It is a crazy, but I in my opinion, I'd say quite a magical world. I think certainly of the age group that I'm at and that I teach, it's that void, shall we say? Yeah. There's like that we fill the gap between from when they finish school at 16 to the point that they're looking at for university. So we've had so many young people come through our doors who have said, I've always wanted to know more about video games. And it's almost, we try and teach the course almost equivalent to like motor vehicle. Like if you're going to go to motor vehicle, you want to know how a car works. You're going to look under the bonnet and tinker with it and understand it more. Games development, it's just the same. You're lifting the curtain away and being able to understand what really goes on with inside of that. So it is a really wonderful place. I think certainly in the last few years, I've seen such an amazing community of people come through together. And everyone's got their interest. Everyone's got such a passion, and everyone's all on the same page. And it's lovely, and everyone's got the same interest, and you start to see this community building up. Everybody loves Minecraft.
But isn't that the key here? It's like, I think that the skill sets of a game. So if we're talking about developer, we're talking about coding. If we're talking about artists, it's art. There's the digital art techniques. There's 3D art. There's environment art. There's all sorts of things to talk about with art. If you're doing design, that's a slightly different thing. But generally, a lot of the skill sets that you're asking people to learn about are transferable skills. But what you're focusing their attention on is something they're genuinely passionate about. Is that a fair summary?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we coincidentally we're at the process of interviewing for the next round of students, and when we sit there and we talk to the students, there's a lot of them that have come from, I don't know, like media studies or computer science at school, so they've already started to gain those skills. So whether they work within, like if they go to IT at this level or if they come to us, as you just said, we've got those transferable skills, and a lot of people have studied art, for example, at GCSE. They've started to come up with a portfolio, maybe even some game ideas, and then they come to us, and we can start to form those ideas, but also work upon those skills, what are new and old. I think something that's really, really lovely as well is, as I said before, the passion of those ideas that people are bringing in at such a young age. They're wanting to explore. They almost want to run before they want to walk, if that makes sense. They're so excited. I think that there is a possibility compared to maybe 10, 15 years ago, where there wasn't really much of games design programs out there, that things are becoming so accessible, and anyone become a games designer now online. And through tutorials, obviously, Game Dev London.
No, that's my job. No, I'm joking, obviously. But actually, I mean, I think so. Let's talk about design. I think there's other things we can talk about in education. I'm just because I'm obviously, for those who know, I'm obsessed with game design, and I think it's been a more tricky area. I think when you're talking about a coding program. Obviously, you've got to decide: are you talking about scripting? Are you talking about C++? Are you talking about whatever else it might be? So I think the choice of an engine typically has been the most common thing I see. And I've done lectures at obviously universities and also sixth form colleges, even an academy school once upon a time up in Liverpool which had a focus on games. Amazing, up in the Baltic area. Right. Amazing bunch of people. In fact, probably the most difficult questions about game design I've ever had came from that sort of 15 to 17-year-old group of kids who were just amazing. They asked me about Wii U. That was the era I did this in. I was not very complimentary, and I got the best response ever. Anyway, enough said. I'm old. I do these things. Anyway, but the point I'm trying to get to is that I can concretely define what a game programming course would need to cover, depending on the depth of coding skill set I expected from the cohort. From the team. I could probably work out the kind of syllabus I'd expect to see for people doing art in games. There's a bunch of things I can kind of understand how I would proceed that, and whether it's pixel art, whether it's concept art, whether it's environment, character, you name it. There's lots of like these are pretty straightforward things to define. Not that I can do any of them, but you can define them. But when you come to game design, I find that you sometimes get problems where you've got the person who's doing the course maybe come from a lot more old school historical engagement game, and they might be looking at level design. Nothing wrong with level design, but it can often leak into art rather than being about the design or the psychology of the play behavior. I often find that the monetization, which is such a critical part of games today, is completely ignored. And I don't expect you to be, let's train people how to I'm not talking about that. But do you see what I mean? The idea of like thinking about, actually, if I'm going to be designing a game, one thing I think should be on the agenda is why I'm making that game. And if you're ignoring the fact that you've got to be able to make it commercial, are you really making a design course? Anyway, so I'm laying out my cards on the table. I want to hear what you think a design course should be, but I'm hopefully highlighting these are things that I think we don't always cover properly across the board. I'm not talking about every level. I'm not talking necessarily. It's sometimes that you need. It's even like post education. We don't really cover it. Anyway, enough about me talking. You tell me. What do you think? What design course is about?
You've hit the nail on the head, really. It's sometimes it's understanding why you're doing something. It's all very well you're going to do something, but you need to have the justification behind it. And I totally agree with you on that one. I think for me, for the amount of years that I've been involved in games dev now, I think one of the most important things is obviously you're going to have the program, you have your art, your research, etc., and your design, but it really needs to be hands-on. I think when we're interviewing students, we get a lot of people who ask, "Are there any exams on this course?" And we go, "Of course not. Well, how do you exam a game? Like, if you're gonna, yeah, exactly. If
I'm
you
going to come up with one.
yeah,
Actually, you joke. One of the things that we did for a corporate client was to design a learning game.
okay,
It's basically an exam, but it's not. But it
yeah.
is. So we've actually made gamified an exam like that. Anyway, sorry, I'm distracted.
No, that's really interesting. Yeah, no, I agree. I think some courses. I'm going to be really careful what I'm going to say now, but with some courses, I see that they teach students the the principles of games design. Okay, we're going to learn through the basics of programming. We're going to go through the art, etc. We're going to do character design, a little bit of animation, start bringing it all together for a game project. Cool, you've hit the deadline. Game built or a little vertical slice built. Done. Right, let's move to the next project. And I think what is sometimes missing is that production side, that publishing bit.
Nice.
And I think what we need is to start showing young people what comes next. Like if you're gonna reveal the curtain, like pull the curtain away on games design, if you're not gonna do it all the way, you want to do it the whole thing.
Yeah.
So
you don't want to overwhelm people. I mean, I don't want to.
Yeah.
I'm genuinely not saying you should tie them to a spreadsheet and force them to work out game balance.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think it is important that young people are given a bit of it, even if they don't necessarily want to do it, but being able to give an insight as to the steps that come after that. On the course at the moment, I've delivered a few workshops where I've said to my students, like we've been building an Xbox game at the moment. It was nominated for a BAFTA last year by our students. Oh, it was unbelievable achievement. They didn't win it; they fell short of the final, unfortunately. But to be able to say, and the youngest person on that team was 16, by the way, to be nominated for a BAFTA. I mean, that is mind blowing. But that game at the moment, we're trying to build to Xbox. And it's not just a case that they've built it, boom, done, right, let's go to the next year, carry on. I've sat with them and I've gone, right, okay, we need to go through these specifications. We need to get testing. We need to get building. We need to go through the whole thing. And they've learned that process now. And it can be the case that I can go, right, here's the computer, here's the console, off you go. And it's almost like letting the reins off a little bit and letting them see that other magical bit, but able to say, you've hit that publish button and your game is now global. And it's personally, it's a beautiful thing to feel. Yeah. And I think sometimes curriculums are just missing that little nugget.
Actually, I think that you've nailed it there. It's like, as much as I bleat on about what things we should teach people about design, actually, when you show people that last 20%, that last 10% even,
yes,
which is not the game making, it's the getting through the, obviously with Xbox, it's the TLCs or TCRs. I always forget which way around it is. I think it's TLCs. All basically means checklist, technical requirements checklist, somewhere along the line. PlayStation calls it one thing, Xbox calls it another, same principle. But getting through that, getting it through QA, getting it uploaded, actually just knowing how to upload it and make sure it can be promoted on a store page. Those little things make a massive difference.
They really do. So I'm hoping the person who's going to listen to this, the one I'm thinking of. So he was my mentor, he was my tutor as well. I've been working for him for years. He's currently working at Unity. But anyway, I remember as a student, I came into college one day and I said, I built a video game. I've built a mobile game. I want to release it. And he said, yeah, absolutely. And we worked together for a few months. We got it sorted and it was published probably early 2014. And it was a real magical thing to sit there with him at his laptop and go, there you go. Your game, within a couple of hours later, was available on all mobile devices. And he shook my hand and he went, congratulations. And it's that moment where I thought, this is really flipping cool. And it was so special. And I actually built another game. And I came back to him a couple of months later and I said, I want to go again. And it's having that feeling of knowing that this is possible. And it's just, as you said, that 10, 20% that sometimes students don't see. That's the bit that really pushes them to go the extra mile to know.
But the reason I think it's so important is because when you get the application rejected, with almost no information, and suddenly you've got to step back and look at all of the details and try and work out piece together like a detective.
Mm-hmm.
What was it with this? Was it some SDK that was not updated properly? Was it that you didn't tick the right box? And some of those boxes you've got to tick in some of the app stores, you think means something else.
Yeah. I think a big part of games dev is the problem solving. No person has ever come through, certainly through our doors, and has like built a game from start to finish with no issues whatsoever. And we actually say to our students, we like it when you make mistakes, and they all go, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we want you to make mistakes because not only do you have more to talk about, but it's a learning curve, and it's one of the best things that can happen to you." Like I've had games denied from the App Store a couple of times. Partly my mistake. I've made really small errors, but I've gone right. Okay, I know
A
not
couple of
to do
times you're
that.
not trying hard enough.
Yeah. But it's those mistakes, and I've then taken those mistakes as a student and gone, right, I'm going to then teach my students that in the future so they know not to do that again. And it's all that feeding through, and it's so important for them to have that experience.
And it's also the scary thing, because I know you often get these advisories. I think it's particularly, I noticed it on Google. You get these advisories, and the way they're worded sound horrific. Oh my God, I'm going to get into so much trouble.
This is like, you have to understand it, don't you?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Yeah. But I think that's really kind of really key there. It's like this idea that it's that last stage. It's the dealing with the horror, the fear, the unknown. When you get these points of information which you've never seen before, can be terrifying. But then if you have seen them before, you look at it and go, that's fine. No worries. And that emotional roller coaster ride of getting past the barriers. And it is interesting, particularly when you start thinking about, well, now the next thing we've got to do is we've got to make sure we've got data. Now we've got to think about how we're going to get revenue. Now we've got to think about how we're going to market the game, because just getting it onto the store doesn't necessarily, in fact, guarantee you won't get any users. Not the tens of thousands that you would need to make money, that is.
Yeah, that's the thing. A lot of people who come onto the course, we give them the option if they want to publish games or not, and it's purely there. If they want it, you go for it. Obviously, it's going to make you more desirable in the future when you go to university and employment, etc. But even if your game has 10 downloads and half of them are your family and a few of them are your mates, it doesn't matter. It really doesn't. To say that you have got something out there is massive, and it's such a huge achievement.
And it comes back to what does success look like, which is kind of where I was talking, one of my questions about whether these things are covered. It's okay to make a portfolio piece. Absolutely. It's okay to make a hobby. I have no problem if you just want to make a game. If success for you is that somebody else plays it and they enjoy it and they get an email saying they enjoyed it, I'm delighted. That's a perfect success if that's what you set out to do.
Yeah.
And I think how we prepare people to understand. So where I'm coming from is you're on this course, and what are you expecting to be able to do as a result? Because I'm thinking about you're preparing people who some of whom, not all, but some of them are going to want to have a career in games.
Yeah.
How do you make sure that the information you're sharing, the active practice that you're asking them to do, because I think that getting the game live is an exam between you and me.
Yeah.
It's probably worse than most exams, but I don't want to say that out loud. Sorry. If you're listening to this, don't let me put you off. It's actually fine, but we have these moments when we're putting games live where you suddenly discover these scary things, and it turns out it wasn't scary at all. It's just the way it was.
Absolutely.
Anyway, the point being is, these people may want to make their own indie game. They may want to work for a game studio. Let's say they want to go work for a games team. How do you make sure that they've got the best chance of success when they take that job? Or is that not what you're trying to do? And I think it's a problem if that's not. I just want to understand, what are you trying to do? And is part of that preparing them for their job?
It is helping to prepare for them for a job. I think it's a few different factors that are incredibly important, certainly as an education perspective. From my experience of obviously being in that seat and being in that classroom, I think it's experience. And when I say experience, I mean being able to understand game engines and being able to build upon a portfolio that can then be presented to professionals. It's being able to have had a chance of being part of an expo where you've got a booth or you've got a stall and you can start sharing your work and promoting yourself outside of outside the classroom. We've had a couple of times this year actually. We've had a couple of my previous students who have done the full journey, and they've studied it with us. They've gone to university. They're now working at one of the companies just within Cambridge, and then they've then come back in to then mentor the students in the seats they once sat in, and it's completing that kind of like that circle, that journey really, where they're then giving them, like our current students, that feedback to say, right, okay, it's really important that you have a look at this and that you consider this. And they're getting that direct communication from the industry so they know what it is for them to prepare themselves. We do give our students the chance to branch off into their specialisms, because it's all very well saying, right, you're going to come to the second year, but you're going to do everything again. But you might get to the end of the first year and go, I actually prefer one subject more than another, and I want to start to hone in on my specialist skills. So we branch everyone off into like design, which is audio, level design, concept art, etc. And the other one is more tech-based, where those want to look into like console development and exporting, importing the games, and just programming and working with the games engine in general. Within that, you're building portfolios on websites, and you're putting LinkedIn pages out there, and Instagram and Twitter. And it's important that even if you decide you want to go indie or have a gap year, or if you want to go into the industry or university, etc., it's important that you are how you show yourself online, because we've got to admit, games is a really competitive industry, and it's grown exponentially in the last 20 years. And it's absolutely crazy. So it's very, very important that the skills that the students are showing are being exhibited in the correct ways, and they're getting that constant feedback coming through and saying, okay, this is the right way to do it, because you're learning from the best. So I think that the biggest part of his experience, and to say that you've been able to do something, I think really makes you stand out more than others.
No, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, I think one of the things that's really interesting from my point of view is the thing you mentioned earlier, which is it's okay to fail. It's something I often talk about, which is I'm a big believer in what Mythbusters say, that failure is always an option. And the only difference between screwing around and science is writing things down. And that's, I suppose, the point about failure. It's like failure lets me see what happened. And as long as you are keeping track of what you did right and wrong, then we can improve. And I think that's really critical. So I'm just going to step back a little bit from that, because I'm thinking about this. I think getting the familiarity, which you've described, for the tools and the techniques, whether it's the art side or whether it's the coding side. But actually, I mean, I think there's what room is there in those kind of courses? Again, this is my bias coming out for looking at game mechanics, as in, do you get people to spend time analyzing the functional flow of a game? Are you looking at the user journey? Are you looking at UX, so user experience? Are you looking at first-time user experience? Is that too much detail for a course at the level you do, or are you hinting at some of that stuff early enough?
It would vary. I think we definitely get students. We have this every year where parents say, my little Jimmy is playing Fortnite for 6 hours on end. Apparently he's doing it for homework. And more often than not, we say, no. We ask some students to maybe analyze a game, go home, maybe play one level of something, and we give them specific criteria for them to consider, whether it's like user experience, maybe functionality, mechanics, etc. So we do like to let students have the option of things they'd like to explore within, and obviously those that we do say, we do think it is important for you to consider this. If you want to go further with that, by all means. And then it might be that suddenly becomes its own pathway for our students. I think going back to the failure thing, actually, I had a student, it was probably just after Christmas, Bless him, he came to me at the end of my lesson and he went, Michael, I've built a game. And I thought, this sounds very familiar because this was me, probably like 10 years ago.
Oh, I get to see this back.
It's like looking at myself. And he turned to me and he said, I've built a game. And I went, oh, I'd love to hear more about it. And he said, basically, I've taken Snake, and what I've got is I move my finger and then you grab the food. And I was like, oh, that's brilliant. Why didn't you put it on mobile? He went, well, I have. And he suddenly pulled out his phone and he's there. And what's happening is as he's dragging his finger along, and when he grabs the food, there's a bit of haptic feedback. I was like, oh, this is brilliant. This is fantastic. Right. And I said, I would love, obviously, with your permission, I think we should have a go at publishing this. Yeah. So we worked together, build and obviously publishing this, until one day he turned to me and he said, do you know what? I don't fancy releasing this. I don't feel like there's, I don't feel ready to show this, if that's all right. I'd like to maybe release another game. And I went, do you know what? That's absolutely fine. Although it's not necessarily a failure in this, but it's okay to say no.
Yeah.
In some cases, it was like, that's absolutely fine. And he's ended up making another fantastic game for PC. And I'm like, this would be brilliant to work on a console. But it's okay that there's no pressure on you to say that you have to do X, Y, and Z. That there's
but that doesn't sound like a failure to me. That just sounds like a change of priorities.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, do you know, I'm going to get very woke with you now, actually, because and I've had to reassure a lot of parents.
Don't worry, this is the right channel. It's okay. We believe in actually supporting people because that's a good thing. I'm not a big fan of the word woke because it's basically an excuse to for being rubbish. Sorry. Yeah.
No, I get you. But do you know what? There is so much pressure on young people at the moment to have their entire career mapped out from 18 to retirement. Yeah. And I mean, you've
crazy.
Yeah. And again, I'm going to say it, but life is too short. You want to enjoy it as much as you can. So I'll tell you what, if you want to go and build a game, you want to go and put it on mobile, you want to go put it on Xbox, you don't want to share it, you want to keep it to yourself and you use that as an art form for your expression, do you know what? You go ahead and do that.
Look, okay? Nothing wrong with that.
Absolutely. And I think...
Anyway, why is that woke? That's not woke. That
is... Okay, let me... Cheesy.
Cheesy. Oh, I'll accept cheesy.
Cheesy. You know what I mean? Like, it's important that people should be able...
Big dollar for that.
Yeah, like it should be. It's important for people to be able to enjoy what they do, and for them to not meet a criteria that's been set for them.
We have a snag, I think, in games in particular, if you had that same conversation in art, and somebody had created a piece of work and they didn't want to exhibit it, you would go, "That's not an issue. That's fine. No one even raised it as a question." But because we're so focused on commerciality, and I'm a professional game maker, I am supposed to help people make games commercially. Yeah. So I will talk about the commercial side all of the time. That doesn't stop me being an obsessive game fan.
Absolutely.
You know, I can be that at the same time. And I can enjoy the fact that there's a kid out there who's experimented, done something joyful, decided to keep it to themselves.
Yeah, and I think... And again, well, games are an art form. And it's a way of people being able to express how they feel. So yeah, I do feel that sometimes out there is a lot of there's an agenda that if you want to be the best, you need to do X, Y, Z. And it should be, we allow these people to be able to grow and explore their skill set. Again, I'm sounding very cheesy here, a big dollop of it.
You're allowed to be a bit cheesy.
Oh, good. But it is important for young people to be able to decide what path they want to be. And if they want to have a go at everything, if they want to go indie, let them chase it. It's so important that they express themselves through that. And if that's how they do it, then we should be there to support that.
We should absolutely be there to support it, because I think actually you say games are art form, and I'm going to be a bit silly about it. I think it's more important than that. Don't buy my head off.
Yeah.
What I mean by that is we're not just an art form. We are an art form, but we're an art form where you do.
Yes.
That is the only art form, arguably. Oh yeah, you could.
With some exceptions, yeah.
Loads of exceptions, I'm sure, and I'm just cutting to the chase because I want to kind of get the point out without. I think there's something joyful about autonomy that we can provide in art, in the art of games. It's something about that autonomy I think is spectacularly interesting. We have barely scraped the surface of the possibility of autonomy, especially when you add into things like, the kind of narrative choices that we can do. If you look at some of the narrative stories out there, how many games are allowing you to sort of go through a story and apply different perspectives simply because you happen to come through that story in a slightly different way. Instead of hearing the story through the protagonist, we now hear the story through the antagonist. We hear the story through some other person, but we get to understand what's going on. I mean, there are some examples but I think too few. But then maybe this is my obsession with games. My obsession with games is personal, but isn't that kind of the point as well? Because you'll have something that, if you applied a little difference to the way that we take autonomy, we have a sense of purpose. What could we do with that?
I totally agree. I think coming off of that, it's important for students. Again, it's important for them to make something they enjoy, and it's important that if you're going to make something, the number one fan of that thing that you make should be you. But if you're going to make a game, it should be that you that is at the, I don't know whether people still do it now, but it should be you at the front of the queue waiting until midnight for your game to be released. Like, it's important for you to love your work as much as you hope other people will as well.
I know a lot of people aren't a fan of this phrase, but I do kind of like it. And it was on the wall at Unity, like, eat your own dog food. I honestly, really it does sum it up. I mean, if you don't love the things that you're making, how can you then expect other people to love it?
Absolutely. It's so important that you put that heart into what you're making, and so other people can enjoy it just as much as you.
But I think it's also important to remember you're not the target audience.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
There's a difference between the love of a game maker, I think, than the love of making games as opposed to the love of playing games. I think they're two separate things. I happen to have both.
Yeah.
I know some people get fed up of playing games when they're game makers, and some people get fed up of game making when they want to play. But I love both. I feel lucky that I have never lost that love of it. But I think this idea that we need to sort of absolutely embrace and love the thing that we're making is so important to being able to be the ambassador, that kind of vision. But if we don't listen to somebody who's not us, who is the target audience, who will play, we're in an echo chamber, and we know that goes bad for us.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. Totally agree with you.
But I think what we're talking about here is learning not just to make games, but learning to play with making games.
Yes, experimentation.
Yeah.
Yes, I agree with you. I think one big thing. So I'll just kind of cut you off there, but what I love about education, certainly my job, is people build games on a PC. Yeah, that's great, but what if you were to have lots of different platforms that you have the possibility of building to? What I'm trying to build at the moment is almost a bit like a games buffet, shall we call it, where a student can come in and they go, do you know what, I love Nintendo Switch, or I love playing on my phone. And I'll go, great, okay, you come in, come and choose the platform, come and learn what specific field or what skills are needed for that particular platform. Now, my second years have just started up their final project of the year, and they've never explored this before, but they're going to have a go at virtual reality. And I mean, that is brilliant. I think it's fantastic. They've explored a bit of Xbox, explored PC, but now they're experimenting with a completely new platform and a completely new skill set, which is brilliant. This is what young people should have, and it's having the option of looking at different things.
And when we get older, we don't have the space. Yes. I don't mean that. I'm not saying we can't have, but in general, when you get commitments and expectations, you've got stakeholders. Yes. Making a shift like that can be a challenge. And if you do make the shift, you've still got a higher level of expectation on you. And I think that inhibits your experimentation. Because if I were to suddenly go off and do VR games, which I'm not, by the way, I love the VR experience, but I don't think there's commercial enough value there. Oh, wait, I've just explained why I have a problem with it, because I don't see enough commercial potential for me to be able to make a difference in that space. Whereas if I look at someone like Bobby at XR Games or Patrick and his team at End Dreams, Sam and Meg Real, there are some amazing people doing amazing things with the VR out there, and they're Tommy Palm, the amazing stuff that they're doing. But I don't think it's ever going to be as accessible as this thing.
No, I totally agree with you. I think,
but
yeah,
then these are going to become a vehicle for experiences at some point. The question is, how quickly does your XR become normal?
I agree. I think certainly with games, because it's only been recently we've just had PlayStation VR 2 come out.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's been a large jump or quite a significant jump actually from the first version that came out in 2018 now, or 2017. But again, with virtual reality, I think we're just scratching the surface. You're getting all these different models coming out there. We are miles away.
I still remember being at GTC, sorry, must have been 2008, 9 or something like that. Maybe a bit later than that. And they had a kind of a viewer thick helmet thing. It was like a bicycle helmet with a viewer. And they literally strapped a move controller vertically and a move controller horizontally and got you to explore a space. It was the first time I ever had a proper, decent experience. And it was awful because they had the movement and so on and so forth. The resolution wasn't bad, but it was the physical heaviness of it. But you could see the possibilities.
Yeah, I think we are just scratching the surface of the potential here with virtual reality. And even now with AR, and I think was it Microsoft HoloLens as well.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what's going on there.
The point is that I am the first generation of internet native, I would argue, because I had a dial-up modem when I was 14, 15. Back in 1984, I think is. Well, I know I've got the Prestel directory 1984 Volume 1 Edition 1. So that Prestel, for anyone who doesn't know what the earth a dial-up modem is, you used to plug a phone into a physical, home phone. You could plug the handset into these rubber suckers to connect to the internet by dialing numbers on the phone. That's insane, I know, but that was the way the internet worked. The hyperlink was invented by British Telecom. 10 years later, well, a bit more than that, 1998, we were discussing if we should charge for using the hyperlink. Imagine that if BT had done that. I happened to be in the room when they were discussing that. It was an amazing kind of thing.
Oh wow!
The point is that we've seen this transition from those really dodgy early days to where we literally wouldn't know where we were if the internet wasn't available. I mean, yes, we have a few black spots, but in general, we're pretty much internet everywhere.
Yeah.
We get annoyed when it's slow. We forget there's a miracle, but it exists. Particularly when I'm streaming a 4K TV show live. Think about that. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I'm watching a 4K TV show live. That's astounding. Where we are with, the kids that are joining your courses, they're going to be the ones who are going to look at what the equivalent of that is in 20 years' time.
Yeah.
30 years' time.
It's quite scary that we've got the power of a computer and essentially a TV in our pockets. Just going off saying you can 4K program.
This is more than the Cray. I think it's more than a Cray computer when I was growing up, which was a supercomputer allegedly. If you think about the amount of computing power they took to get to the moon, we dwarfed that on mobile phones in 2003.
And I think what mobile games, I think, is where everything started to take that shift. And of being part of that generation of having the release of the iPhone and then mobile games, and being at school at that point where all of these started.
That's old school. I predate that. That's modern comparatively, because Java games. So I used to run Mobile Operator 3's game platform back in 2003 to 2006. Java games existed before the iPhone.
Yes.
Now, they didn't make any money. That's not fair. They made some, but the point is that a lot of the skill set we see, and this is just there's a chain of thought here. Don't worry, I'm coming back to the chain of thought. We're talking about the type of kids who are doing the kind of games courses that we're seeing now. Being very patronising calling them kids, but hopefully you know what I mean. Hey, fellow kids. The point I'm trying to make is, when I met people like Il Capano and Christian Segazari, all these kind of like uber, stars of the modern age, they were selling me games on Java devices back in like 2003-4. Robios. We launched the first ever kind of Robio named game, which is The Darkest Sphere in 2004, I think. So you think about these giants now were just people making games because they love making games.
Yeah.
A lot of them had left Nokia or at some point somebody will do a legacy of the impact that Nokia had on why Finland is the most dominant space for mobile gaming in the world, in my opinion. But the point I'm trying to get to is that these individuals just were trying it out. Here was a new space. Here was a new way of doing things. And I think what you'll see coming out of the students you're working with is you're providing them with a space where they can see what the next thing is going to be. And your kids you just described doing VR, it may not be the VR. It's not the mobile Java that succeeded. It's the mobile device experience that succeeded. Maybe it's not the VR that they're doing now, but learning about spatial computing, which is what VR will teach them, will put them in a position where they're ready to be in the right space at the right time when spatial computing becomes mass market.
Yeah, it's crazy though that this is an industry that is changing yearly, and I mean it's crazy how many. Yeah,
but it's joking. But every 3 months, I would argue, I think there's a significant change to the market every 3 months.
Yeah, it's mad how quickly things are evolving, and it is trying to find a way of creating an experience of being able to directly feed in and keeping them up to date with everything. And it can be a challenge. I'll be honest with you, to trying to keep up with all the new software and all the tech and new equipment, and it's never going to stop. And that's because we, as a human race, we become so dependent on technology, and then finding that technology and turning it into a medium of entertainment as well. Obviously, with like streaming and being able to play games, or even Netflix have become a video games company now as well. And it's like, where is this going? Like, how is it going to end? Like,
but I think we can step back a little bit from that, and I maybe it's because I have the significant age problem. I don't feel old; I just look old. The point is that I've seen that the more things change, the more they stay the same. The syntax changes, the specific device changes, but who is at the end of the device? It's a person.
Yeah.
And what do we love? We love puzzles and stories. And I think this is what games has as sort of a opportunity. How we deliver an experience. It's all about that start condition, that challenge, that resolution, the reward. If we can teach people to understand what makes that work, then you actually can find it's not just entertaining them that's going to work. It's also the impact it has culturally on the way we look at other experiences. I think it's an amazing kind of opportunity if we look at the psychology rather than the hardware that we happen to be using today.
Yeah, we're just scratching the surface on something that's it's scary in some ways, but also incredibly exciting. We earn the games industry generate a fair few billion quid more than the music
88 billion in 2022, and that was a decline on the previous year because a normalization from the pandemic. That's according to Newzoo. I may have got the number wrong. Apologies if I have. Go check up Newzoo. Never believe me when I talk numbers. I'm only vaguely remembering these things. But the point is that was a decline in mobile particularly, but also an increase in PC.
Yes.
What's interesting about that is that they didn't differentiate between download PC games, as in like games and service type stuff, versus packaged good PC. And I suspect there's been more of a growth in service games on PC than we realise.
Yeah.
But I might be wrong.
Yeah, I think one big thing, I wasn't going to mention it, but we can't really ignore the last 2-3 years with the pandemic.
Yeah.
And obviously
well, that's why there's been a normalization, because we were sorry, if you work in the games industry, you probably know that you didn't stop working unless you were in a studio that wasn't scaled to work remotely. And I feel really sad for those people who were let go or went through struggles, whether they're in games industry or not, but in particularly those in games industry, because I think it's a failure of management. Games is a natural, generally, I'm being a bit mean now. Take me, my heart is good, trust me. I may say things which are intentionally provocative, but they're for entertainment purposes. But my point is that those of us who could work remotely, games is a natural space for that remote working, I would argue. The fact is that most people who were affected poorly by the pandemic, I feel like games was a natural outlet, and that connectivity, the Zoom meeting became a norm, which is a symptom that the technology that we were using in games, that other people were using as who were on the kind of technology front, became mass market.
Yeah.
It's that process will not be reversed, but it means that I will now go out and talk to somebody in person rather than using Zoom quite as often, but I'll still use Zoom when I need to.
Yeah, I agree. I think obviously we all, I want to come from an education perspective in just a moment, but lockdown happened. I mean, young people, very, very young people, and then suddenly locked in, and we're starting to see the knock-on effects now in schools and colleges at the moment. But everyone's locked in, and what do you do for 3 months? There's no school. Sometimes there's no school running online. You've got Easter holidays coming up. There's nothing going. You're not even allowed to go see your mates. You can't leave your house. So everyone then suddenly turns to their computer. They're playing video games, or if they're of the age and they've got a bit of like a good understanding or a good level of knowledge when it comes to games, they start becoming developers. They've got the facilities at home. All they need is a computer, internet connection, and off they go. Suddenly, we're birthing games developers straight out of the pandemic.
Fantastic.
But I'll be honest with you, from my professional perspective, going into lockdown in March 2020, and that and being through 2 lockdowns, that was the most stressful and hardest experience I've ever had within my career.
Really,
honestly, it was. Obviously, I was with my family. Some of my family were furloughed,
right?
But where they were then having that time to be able to work on maybe things at home, myself and my sister, we had to keep going. There was no stop. The only time we got were the weekends and the Easter holidays, and then being able to sit there at home to then try and guide people through their games and support them was such a monumentous task. And in comparison to being in a classroom where you've got that divide between being an educator and then being your own person, the whole 2 worlds collided.
Yeah,
and it was so difficult. So it's great that some young people have got that almost that little independence and that confidence to go, do you know what? I am going to sit at my computer. I am going to have a go at watching a couple of tutorials in, I don't know, Unity and Unreal, and I'm going to have a go at doing something. But
not everyone has that confidence, do they?
No, and there are a lot of people who, certainly like myself, I get distracted working from home, and I need to be within a classroom setting. I need to be surrounded by people, and especially when I think one game that was hit quite badly by the pandemic, I think it was Square Enix. They were working on Marvel's Avengers at the time, and I remember seeing the documentary when it came out, and they were hit by the pandemic. Everything went into lockdown. Everyone started working from home, and I think they actually had their launch from home, and you could see everybody in the Zoom call, all the developers, the concept artists, everyone part of the team in this massive Zoom call, and they launched their game from home. And I'm like, and as you said, we're now relying on Teams and Zoom, and I don't know whether Skype is still a thing, to be honest with you, but everything.
Oh, it's still a thing, yeah.
Oh, it is. I didn't know if Teams kind of took it away.
No, Skype still exists. Interesting. I'm not a big Teams fan. I find it a bit cumbersome, but yeah.
But then it's that divide that we used to have. Everything has suddenly collided, and we can text people from work through Teams or whatever, or Zoom, etc. when we're on the go, and it can be struggle to sometimes find the divide. I feel like I'm straying a little bit from the education side.
No, but I mean, I want to come back to that, because I think so. I think what we're saying here, yes, I think you've hit the point. We had a very mixed experience. Some people who were already geared up to work remotely, I think, ended up having to do more work, and I think, or end up. I know for my case, I ended up finding more work. We were setting up a game publisher at the time, so nothing stopped. Like you said, nothing stopped. But for a lot of people I know, personal friends of mine, things stopped, and being furloughed was no joke for them.
I just want to throw it out there. Obviously, I know some people that were being furloughed during the pandemic. It was still awful for them, because obviously some of them really relied on their work, and sometimes mentally being within that that routine and that schedule, and that people relying on that, suddenly, boom, it's all been taken away, and it was a real scary experience.
But where I was going to take it is that I appreciate all that context. We've got a lot of kids, and I know some individuals have social anxiety, particularly around, I think quite an increased level of social anxiety post-pandemic. But I know some people who have struggled with doing the video calls. And I think that have you seen a need to accommodate people, particularly around the mental health aspects, who want to join the course? Has the level of mental health needs of students increased post-pandemic, and is that affecting the way you design the course?
The short answer is yes. It's been quite significant, and I think sometimes I'm going to try and decide how deep I get with this. Obviously, we certainly through the pandemic, as an educator, we were there to then support the students. Safeguarding, obviously, still having to do their job. They're still trying to support the students, etc. But then the impact was then starting to take its toll on the teachers. I find, and I'm hoping there are other teachers out there that listen to this can empathise. But it was a very, very difficult task. But in today, and obviously having meetings with people, if I've got a one-to-one with a student, I've got to call them from home. Their camera won't be on, either because they've got a really messy room, or they've got the anxiety of not wanting to talk through a camera, or maybe they prefer face to face. But it's that human interaction that we lose, and it's so important that we can shake somebody's hand, and we can give somebody a hug and be able to congratulate them, or say hello properly. And it's the same with games, and trying to design it so we use Microsoft Teams for like assignments and message students to see if they're all right. The only benefit I find coming out of the pandemic and using platforms such as Teams is communication. Like if a student's going to be late because of the bus, they can just drop me a text. Cool, got that. I'm aware, and then that's great. So there's less of a reason for me to go, "Oh, why are you late?" Because they've gone, "Well, I'll text you already," and I'm like, "That's perfect." And we've built up that communication, and I think it's almost like a benefit for some young people as well, that they're learning how to be able to communicate properly or on another level with their teachers. So it's really important, especially coming out of the pandemic now, that we're having our contacts built up from the industry again, rather than having them through video calls and them doing a workshop that way, that they're actually they're engaging, they're sat with the learners, and they're actually getting a hands-on experience and a proper conversation with them. So it is important that we're trying to almost not squash out the effects of COVID completely, but kind of almost rebuild, bring back to what we were before, but also use those knock-on effects to our advantage, such as communication. and the way we kind of organise like our assignments, etc. So,
no, I think that sounds right. I mean, I think what it sounds to me like is actually there were a bunch of things that probably may have needed to be dealt with, but they weren't surfaced, like
yeah,
mental health of your students maybe didn't get the attention potentially that it could have done. The fact that the pandemic, in some twisted kind of way, has put us in a situation where we have to pay more attention. We have to provide those communication pathways. And my hope is that those communication pathways lead to individuals who are better able to communicate or feel more comfortable communicating when they do step into those commercial roles.
you know, it's so you've hit the nail on the head actually, because now as we've got, obviously I've got to have Teams open up all my lessons, and I have got a few students that might suffer with social anxiety, and they might not feel comfortable to walk down the front of the classroom in front of everyone while they're working to then start to talk about how they feel. They can just drop me a text. They can text from the other end of the room and they can say, "Hi, Michael, can I just talk to you at the end of the lesson?" And I go, "Yeah, absolutely fine. Just stay where you are. Once everyone's packed up, come and join me and we can talk." And it's great.
Liberating.
Yeah, that they can go, I feel comfortable to message to let you know, rather than them just walking out the classroom at the end of the day and us never knowing. So,
Well, they're not having to embarrass themselves in the process.
absolutely, yeah. It's not
I mean, how horrifying was that when you were when I was younger? That wouldn't be doable at all.
yeah, and it's almost avoiding like, haha, that person needs to talk to the teacher. Like, no, it's a subtlety to it that we can support those that might be struggling. You know, I was at a school this morning doing a workshop. I looked around the room and I was like, these are year 9 students. And I tried to do the maths in my head and I thought, hold on, they had just finished primary school or they just started year 7. These are the kids that went into lockdown at the very start of secondary school.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I'd love to have seen them come back into like the start of year 8 or halfway through year 7. I'd love to have seen how they communicated with people, because it might have been they'd never even met half the year group until they set foot back in the classroom, maybe a year later. I'd love to. I know that sounds really weird to have said, but I'd love.
I know it's an anthropological kind of like question, isn't it? You know,
yeah, it's almost delayed communication, like development in some ways.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really bizarre, but.
And I think that kind of isn't that the point really at the end of the day, which is we're learning all the way through. We're learning about how to teach people. We're learning how to communicate with people, and hopefully, to wrap the podcast up, thank you for listening. If you've listened to this, hopefully we've given you kind of an interesting journey on what it's like coming from the perspective of somebody who's trying to help the next generation of people who want to learn about how to make games in that intermediate step, post-school, pre-university, how they're going to take that step forward. And Michael, thank you very much. Is there anything you want to sort of leave people with before we close off?
Yeah, obviously, again, I'm going to throw some cheese out there. Why not? I think if you've got an idea, do you know what? Just run with it. I think there's so much pressure, as I've said, on young people to come up with the next big thing and to come up with an idea. Do you know what? If you've got something, just make it. I think just the most important thing for you to do while doing that is just have fun. Because if you're not having fun, no one else is. And it's so important you just enjoy what you do.
Yeah, I'd go further. I'd back that up. We need to learn to play again.
Yeah.
And making games should be playful.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's be playful.
Education should be fun, and it should be an experience for all those. And it's, you've hit it perfectly. So, yeah, have fun, enjoy, play games, make games.
And on that note, thank you, Michael, so much. You can be contacted, I think, on the Michael K1.
Yes,
is that correct?
Yes.
On the Twitters and stuff like that. I'm Athanasius, and obviously thank you very much for participating with this. And if you want to know more about Game Dev London, then you can check out all of the details, join the Discord, chat more. If you've enjoyed this conversation, if you want to hear more like it, go check out the Game Dev London podcast. Do the usual, like, subscribe, and share with other people. Tell them what's going on. If you have a particular topic that you think would be really interesting for us to explore, again, please feel free to let us know. That's what this is all about. So, Michael, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I have been your host. This has been your Game Dev London podcast, and thank you very much for listening.